Welcome to Hope Stories. What would you do if the love of your life vanished without a trace, only to return years later through the eyes of a child you never knew existed? This isn't just a story about loss, it's about a secret powerful enough to shatter an empire, and a bond between father and daughter that becomes both their greatest weapon and their greatest risk. Behind every whispered memory lies betrayal. Behind every choice waits a cost that could destroy everything they hold dear. As the shadows of corruption close in, one man is forced to confront a truth darker than he ever imagined and decide whether protecting his family means saving them or sacrificing them. And now, step with us into a journey where love, vengeance, and justice collide in ways that will stay with you long after the final word. The late afternoon sun burned low over the city, staining the pavement with copper light as Sophia darted between traffic, her small hands clutching a crumpled bag of candy. She was only 8, but her eyes held the kind of wary wisdom that came from selling sweetness to strangers who rarely looked her way. When the leather wallet slipped from the tailored jacket of a man stepping out of a black town car, Sophia froze. She bent down, fingers brushing against smooth leather embossed with gold initials, MC. She could have kept it. God knows she had needs, but something in her chest whispered otherwise. She ran after him, calling out in her thin but determined voice, "Sir, you dropped this!" Michael Carter turned, his polished shoes halting on the curb. A millionaire real estate mogul, accustomed to empty gestures and false smiles, he wasn't prepared for the sight of a thin girl in worn sneakers holding his wallet with both hands as though it weighed more than she did. Gratitude flickered across his face, but it wasn't until he noticed the glint of metal on her finger that his world tilted violently. The ring. Not just any ring, the ring. A modest gold band with a tiny sapphire, engraved with words only 2 people in the world were meant to know. 15 years earlier he had commissioned it for Emily, the woman who vanished before the wedding, leaving him hollow and cold. He had buried that grief with his parents, who died in what he was told was a tragic accident. Yet here it was, shining defiantly on the finger of a child who should have had no connection to any of it. "Where did you get that?" Michael's voice cracked, uncharacteristically raw. Sophia shifted uneasily, clutching her bag tighter. "It was my mother's," she said softly. Her gaze lifted to his, and Michael felt the ground slide out from under him. As they sat together on a bench near the busy square, the noise of the city faded into static. Sophia spoke of Emily in the only way a child could, simple, fragmented truth stitched with longing. Emily had been sick for years, working nights in anonymous offices, always writing, always whispering warnings about men who would do anything to stay in power. She had told Sophia that one day, when the time was right, she would meet someone who carried the same scar of loss. Michael listened, each word twisting deeper into his chest. He remembered Emily's laughter, her stubborn fire, the way she once warned him not to trust certain allies. He remembered dismissing her fears as paranoia. And now, through the mouth of a child, came proof that she hadn't been paranoid at all. She had been hunted. Then Sophia revealed something that turned grief into dread. Emily had left her letters, locked away with a trusted priest, and in them she named names. Men in suits who smiled for cameras while orchestrating assassinations. Men who had the reach to silence anyone. Among them, Senator Richard Mendoza, Michael's old business partner and the architect of his own arranged marriage years ago. Mendoza, the same man whose influence had shaped the investigation into his parents' deaths. Michael's hands trembled as he realized the truth. His parents had not died in an accident. They had been murdered. Emily had known, and she had carried that knowledge alone, protecting a child he had never known existed. The bench seemed to shrink under the weight of the revelation. He studied Sophia's face, the curve of her jaw, the determined set of her mouth. So much of Emily reflected back at him. And yet there was something else, something that belonged to him alone. His daughter, his blood. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Sophia's voice was steady, eerily calm for her age. "Because she said the day I found you would be the day everything begins." For the first time in years, Michael Carter felt both terror and purpose collide. His entire life had been nothing more than a carefully constructed cage built by powerful men. Now, sitting beside this fragile yet unbreakable girl, he understood what Emily had prepared. A war, disguised as love, passed down to a daughter who bore it with the courage of a soldier. But as Michael reached for Sophia's hand, something darker unfurled. A black sedan idled at the far end of the square, windows tinted, engine purring like a predator. Sophia's small fingers tightened around his. "They're watching us, aren't they?" she whispered. Michael didn't answer. He didn't need to. The moment his eyes met the shadows behind that glass, he knew the truth. Mendoza's people already knew about her. Would you risk everything for a child you never knew existed? How far would you go when love collides with vengeance and the truth could kill you both? And as Michael pulled Sophia into the crowd, heart hammering, one question burned brighter than the rest. Was he ready to become the weapon Emily had forged in secret? The night was just beginning. The crowd swallowed them as Michael led Sophia through the thrumming streets, his grip on her hand iron tight. The black sedan lingered in the corner of his vision, sliding forward like a shark pacing its prey. Michael's chest burned with questions he couldn't yet ask, because the most dangerous thing right now wasn't what Sophia had revealed. It was that someone else already knew she had revealed it. They ducked into a side alley, its brick walls sweating grime and shadow, and only then did Michael stop, breath coming hard. He crouched to Sophia's level, his eyes searing with urgency. "What else did she leave you?" he demanded, his voice sharper than he intended. Sophia didn't flinch. She reached into the canvas pouch slung over her shoulder and pulled out a folded scrap of paper, edges worn soft with time. She opened it carefully, like it might dissolve in her hands, and showed him a sketch of a key and 3 words in Emily's delicate handwriting. "Trust Father Miguel." Michael's blood went cold. He remembered Miguel, the priest who had counseled him after his parents' funeral, a man who had whispered that the truth would one day surface, even when Michael scoffed. If Emily had entrusted Miguel with something, it was no mere keepsake. It was evidence, maybe the kind that could topple Mendoza if used correctly. But with that knowledge came the weight of another realization. Miguel would be a target too. The choice pressed down on Michael with suffocating force. He could take Sophia and run, vanish into the anonymity his wealth could still buy, hide her from Mendoza's gaze until the storm passed. But the image of Emily's face, the face he had loved, the face she had hidden from the world while she carried this unbearable burden, rose before him like a specter. She had fought alone for years, and in doing so, she had carved a path of justice for a daughter who deserved more than hiding in shadows. Could he really betray her memory by turning away now? Sophia's eyes, dark and unblinking, studied him. "She told me you'd try to protect me by walking away," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "But if you do, we both die. She said you'd want to save me by keeping me safe, but the only way to save me is to finish what she started." Her words sliced through him because they were Emily's words too, carried through her child. For a moment Michael hated himself, hated his cowardice, his hesitation, his years of silence while Emily had been bleeding for the truth. The sound of tires screeching at the mouth of the alley broke the moment. 2 men stepped out, their suits immaculate, their expressions almost casual. They weren't gangsters. They were professionals, the kind of men who looked more at home in Senate offices than on city streets. One of them smiled thinly at Michael. "Mr. Carter, the senator would like to have a word. And the girl, of course." Michael's instincts screamed at him to fight, but the gun bulging beneath the man's jacket made the decision clear. He had no weapon, no leverage, except for the truth Emily had left behind. He pulled Sophia behind him, his voice low but steady. "Tell Mendoza I'll bring him what he wants," he lied, "but only on my terms." The men exchanged a glance, their smirks hinting at arrogance. They believed they held all the cards. As they retreated, Michael realized the lie had bought him only hours, maybe less. Sophia clutched his sleeve, whispering, "We can't go home, can we?" He shook his head. "Home doesn't exist anymore," he said. What existed now was a war, and yet beneath the fear something new coiled inside him, rage. Not the clean, fleeting anger of betrayal, but a consuming fury sharpened by love. Mendoza hadn't just stolen his parents, he had stolen Emily, stolen years of a daughter's life, stolen the very chance for Michael to be a father. Now Mendoza wanted to steal Sophia too, and that Michael would never allow. For the first time, he felt the full truth of Emily's prophecy. They were no longer victims. They were weapons. That night, in a motel room that smelled of mildew and gasoline, Michael sat across from Sophia as she spread Emily's letters on the bed. There were names of judges, CEOs, police captains, all people Michael had once toasted at charity galas. He felt bile rise in his throat as realization crashed down. He had been shaking hands with the very men who orchestrated his ruin. And yet, somewhere among those names, he also saw opportunity. If Emily had mapped out Mendoza's empire, there would be cracks, alliances he could break, allies he could turn. Sophia leaned forward, her voice no louder than a prayer. She said you would know which piece to move first. Michael stared at her, feeling both terrified and awed. Emily hadn't just prepared Sophia. She had prepared him, through her child. And in that moment he understood something brutal. He wasn't just fighting to honor Emily anymore. He was fighting to earn the right to call himself Sophia's father. If you were Michael, would you risk dragging a child into a battle that could consume her? Or would you hide her away and betray the legacy of the woman you loved? As headlights swept past the motel window and the letters trembled in Michael's hands, one thing was certain. The next move would decide whether they lived as fugitives or rose as avengers. The game had already begun. Michael barely slept. The motel's thin curtains leaked neon light from the gas station across the street, and the hum of passing trucks rattled the thin walls. But what kept him awake wasn't the noise. It was the letters spread across the bed between him and Sophia. Emily's handwriting stared back at him, every curve of her pen a whisper from beyond the grave. He traced the ink with his finger, his chest tightening at the thought of her hunched over some desk in the dark, risking everything to record the truth. And now, that truth was in his hands, and he had no idea if he was strong enough to carry it. Sophia had fallen asleep on top of the papers, her cheek pressed against the names of men powerful enough to end both of their lives before morning. Michael studied her in the dim light, torn between pride and terror. She was Emily's child. Brilliant, stubborn, fearless, but she was still just a girl who should have been worrying about homework and sleepovers, not assassination plots and corrupted senators. His gut twisted with the urge to scoop her up, to drive as far as he could until the world forgot they existed. But every time the thought came, Emily's voice haunted him. She had believed in justice more than her own safety, and in preparing Sophia for this war, she had made it clear, running would never be enough. Just before dawn, Michael's phone buzzed. An unknown number flashed on the screen. An instinct told him not to answer, but something colder urged him to pick up. A voice slid through the receiver, smooth and venomous. "Mr. Carter," it said, "I hope you're enjoying your family reunion. You have something that belongs to us. If you think you can hide, remember what happened to your parents. And remember, little girls are fragile." Michael's heart slammed into his ribs. He snapped the phone shut, but the damage was done. The motel wasn't safe. Whoever Mendoza had working for him, they knew about Sophia, and worse, they knew where to find them. He shook her awake, his voice tight. "We have to move. Now." They fled into the gray morning, Sophia clutching the pouch of letters, Michael gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. He drove without speaking, his mind caught in a spiral of fury and fear. Every memory of his parents' kindness, every flash of Emily's laughter, every stolen year he had lost with Sophia, all of it boiled into a single truth. Mendoza had stolen too much already. But as rage threatened to consume him, another voice rose inside. What if dragging Sophia into this fight destroyed her too? Was he any better than the men who used innocence as leverage if he forced her to bear the same danger? Hours later, they arrived at the weathered farmhouse of Jack Reynolds, Michael's oldest friend, now a retired investigator. Jack listened in silence as Michael laid out Emily's revelations and the threats closing in. When Michael finally fell quiet, Jack leaned back in his chair, his face grave. "You realize what you're holding is a bomb, right? This isn't just about Mendoza. Those names, those transactions, half of Washington will burn if this goes public. You think they'll let you live long enough to light the fuse?" Michael's stomach clenched. He hadn't considered the scale. He'd been blinded by personal vengeance. Emily hadn't just documented Mendoza. She had traced the rot through boardrooms, courtrooms, entire branches of government. To use this evidence meant declaring war not on one man, but on an entire system. Jack's words dug into him. Was he ready to destroy everything, knowing Sophia would be caught in the fire? Sophia, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. Mom knew this wasn't just about us. She said the only way to protect me was to protect everyone. If we don't do it, someone else's kid will grow up like me, alone, scared, selling candy on the street while men like Mendoza smile on TV. Her voice cracked, but her eyes didn't waver. I don't want to hide anymore. Michael felt his throat close. He wanted to shield her, to tell her she was just a child and didn't need to carry this weight. But he also knew Emily had been right. Sophia had already been carrying it her whole life. The true battle wasn't only against Mendoza, it was inside himself, between the father who wanted to protect his daughter and the man Emily had asked him to become. A weapon sharp enough to cut through corruption itself. If you were in Michael's place, would you unleash the truth and risk burning down the system, or bury it forever to keep your child safe? As Michael looked at Sophia, her small hands gripping the damning evidence, he knew the next choice he made would not only decide their fate, but the fate of a nation. And Jack's warning echoed in the silence. Once the first domino falls, there is no turning back. Jack's farmhouse creaked in the wind, its walls lined with old case files and the smell of dust and coffee. Michael stood by the window, staring at the fields beyond, though his thoughts were miles away. The evidence Emily had gathered sat on the table behind him like a living thing, its weight pulling the air taut. Sophia leafed through the letters again, lips moving silently as though reading her mother's words gave her strength. Jack leaned back in his chair, arms folded, his expression carved from stone. If we leak this, the country shakes, he said flatly. If we don't, Mendoza keeps building his empire, but either way, you're a marked man now. Michael turned, his eyes hollow. I don't care what happens to me, he said, but she, he gestured toward Sophia, who pretended not to listen. She's just a child. I can't use her as bait. Jack snorted. Newsflash, she already is. They know who she is. They know what she carries. The only choice left is whether you fight back or let them decide her fate. Michael's throat tightened. For years he had hidden from grief, built empires of steel and glass to protect himself from loss. But now he faced a choice so raw it stripped him bare. Protect Sophia by hiding, or honor Emily by unleashing the storm. His father's voice echoed in memory, the advice he had ignored when he was younger. Sometimes protecting your family means facing the fire, not avoiding it. The sound of tires on gravel broke the moment. Jack stiffened and moved to the door, peering out. A sleek SUV crawled up the drive, too polished, too deliberate for a rural visit. Michael's pulse spiked. They found us. Jack grabbed a shotgun from behind the door, but Michael knew it wouldn't be enough. 3 men stepped out, dark suits against the pale sky, carrying the quiet arrogance of predators who never lost. One of them called out, his voice deceptively polite. Mr. Carter, the senator sends his regards. We'd like to have a word. Michael felt Sophia press against his side, her hand trembling in his. Jack's eyes darted to him. They had 2 options, fight or talk. But as the men approached, Michael's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen and froze. A message lit up the display. We have Father Miguel. 1 hour. Bring the files. His heart crashed against his ribs. Father Miguel, Emily's last confidant, the guardian of her secrets, was in their hands. Michael's mind spun. If they killed Miguel, the trail of truth would collapse. But if he handed over the files, Emily's sacrifice would vanish into ashes. He closed his eyes for a second, suffocated by the trap. Sophia looked up at him, her face pale but her voice steady. Dad, we can't give it to them. That's what Mom said. They'll kill him anyway. They'll kill all of us. The word Dad cut into him with both joy and agony. It was the first time she had called him that. And in that fragile syllable lay all the trust she had chosen to place in him. How could he betray it by gambling her future against an impossible choice? Jack swore under his breath. They'll storm this place in minutes. You've got to decide now, Michael. Save the priest or save the mission. Michael felt his soul tearing apart. He had lost Emily because he failed to act soon enough. He had lost his parents to a system that crushed anyone who stood in its way. And now, in his daughter's eyes, he saw the possibility of losing everything once again. If you were standing in Michael's shoes, would you sacrifice the life of an innocent man to protect the mission or risk the mission to save him? As the suited men advanced across the gravel and Sophia's small hand tightened around his, Michael realized he had only seconds to choose, and whichever path he took would brand him forever. The silence before his answer was more dangerous than any bullet. The gravel crunched under polished shoes as the men in suits drew closer, their calm expressions concealing violence. Michael's breath came heavy, his body rigid as Sophia pressed against him. Jack shifted the shotgun slightly, his finger grazing the trigger, but even he knew they were outgunned. The message on Michael's phone burned in his mind. "We have Father Miguel. 1 hour. Bring the files." It was a trap. He knew it, Sophia knew it, and yet the weight of Miguel's life bore down on him like a stone pressing his chest. Sophia's whisper barely reached him. "If we give them the files, everything Mom did dies with them. We can't." Her eyes shimmered with fear, but also with the unshakable fire of Emily's legacy. For a second, Michael wanted to scream at her to stop, to let him decide, to be a child, not a soldier in this war she never chose. But she had chosen in her own way. The moment she ran after him with that wallet, the moment she revealed the ring that shattered his world. She was already part of it, and so was he. The lead man raised a hand, signaling his partners to halt. "Mr. Carter," he said smoothly, "time is short. Senator Mendoza has been very patient, but his patience ends now. Give us what we came for, and the priest walks free. Refuse, and, well." He glanced at Sophia in a way that made Michael's blood turn to ice. Michael's mind fractured into pieces of memory. His father's stern advice, his mother's gentle touch, Emily's eyes when she told him to trust her instincts. They had all believed he was strong enough to stand against the storm. But now, with Sophia's hand locked in his and Jack's tense silence at his back, he realized strength wasn't about enduring. It was about choosing. And the choices before him were poison. Jack muttered, "If we shoot our way out, none of us make it." His voice was steady, but his knuckles whitened against the shotgun's grip. Michael's phone buzzed again. Another message. His heart stopped as he read it. "She's not your only child." His vision blurred. He blinked, staring at the words again, certain he was imagining them. But there it was, undeniable. Sophia noticed the change in his face. "What is it?" she asked, voice trembling. Michael couldn't answer. He remembered nights with Emily that no one else knew about, months before her disappearance. Could she have hidden more than Sophia from him? Could Mendoza's men be taunting him with a lie? Or was there another child out there, waiting in the shadows of this conspiracy? The idea split him apart. One daughter beside him, flesh and blood, terrified yet brave. Another, perhaps lost, perhaps in Mendoza's hands. His pulse thundered as realization hit. If there was another child, then Mendoza had leverage beyond anything he had imagined. Miguel's life was one thing, but his blood, his family, twisted and hidden, that would break him. Jack caught his eye and whispered, "They're playing you. Lies are cheaper than bullets." But Michael couldn't dismiss it. The possibility tore into his soul. If there was even a chance it was true, could he afford to gamble with silence? Sophia tugged his sleeve, eyes searching his. "Dad, don't believe them. Mom would have told me." Her faith in Emily was unshakable, but Michael's own faith had been shattered too many times. He didn't know if he could bear being wrong again. The suited men stepped closer, impatience seeping into their calculated calm. Michael stood paralyzed between rage and dread. He wanted to protect Sophia with everything he had. But what if protecting her meant sacrificing someone else, someone who might share her blood? The war Emily had prepared him for was no longer about evidence or justice. It was about identity, about family, about how much truth one man could carry before it destroyed him. If you were Michael, would you risk everything on the chance that Mendoza's message was a lie? Or would you surrender the mission to save what might be another child caught in the crossfire? As the men's shadows stretched across the porch and Sophia's voice broke through his turmoil, Michael felt the world tilt again, realizing that the next words out of his mouth could decide not only who lived, but who he really was. The clock was already ticking. The silence between Michael and the men stretched so thin it felt like the earth itself would split. Jack's grip on the shotgun faltered under the weight of the impossible choice, and Sophia's small hand clung tighter to her father's, as if her strength alone could anchor him to the right path. The words on the screen, "She's not your only child," echoed in Michael's skull, a poison that twisted every thought. He wanted to believe it was a lie, a cruel manipulation meant to break him. But what if it wasn't? What if Emily, desperate and hunted, had hidden away another life to keep it safe? The possibility gnawed at him. The lead man's voice cut through the still air. "Time's up. Decide." His calmness was a blade pressing into Michael's throat. Michael's knees nearly buckled beneath the pressure of generations of betrayal and sacrifice. His parents murdered, Emily destroyed by the very system that should have protected them, Sophia forced to grow up in shadows. He looked at her now, her face pale but fierce, eyes that bore both his pain and Emily's fire. For a moment, he hated himself for even considering the lie. This girl was here, living, breathing, trusting him to be the father she had been denied. He couldn't let her down. Michael raised his voice, steady now, though it shook his soul. "Tell Mendoza this ends tonight. He doesn't get the files. He doesn't get my daughter. And if there's another child, then I'll find them myself." The men's polite masks cracked, fury sparking behind their eyes. One reached for his weapon, but Jack fired first, the shotgun's thunder splitting the dawn. Chaos erupted, shouts, bullets slamming into wood, Sophia screaming as Michael pulled her to the floor. Years of corporate boardrooms had not prepared him for this violence, but rage and love had. He tackled one of the men, slamming his head against the porch rail until he went limp. Jack fell with a cry as another shot tore through his shoulder, but he kept firing, his old instincts alive. When the smoke cleared, two men lay bleeding on the gravel, and the third stumbled back to the SUV, clutching his arm. Michael stood over him, chest heaving, gun trembling in his hand. For one terrible second, he thought of pulling the trigger, ending it there. But Sophia's voice stopped him. "Dad, don't! Mom said justice, not vengeance." The weapon dropped from his grasp. The SUV roared away, leaving only silence and the metallic taste of blood in the air. Jack groaned on the porch, clutching his wound, but alive. Michael knelt beside him, torn between gratitude and despair. The message on his phone still burned in his pocket, unanswered, unresolved. Was there truly another child out there? Or had he condemned Miguel and an innocent soul to death by calling their bluff? He would never know. The not knowing would haunt him longer than any scar. Over the next days, Michael and Sophia disappeared into a network of allies Jack had once trusted. Together, they leaked the files, detonating Emily's years of work in a single cascade. The press erupted with names of politicians, businessmen, judges. Mendoza was dragged into the light, his empire collapsing under the weight of evidence too vast to bury. The trial that followed was brutal and public, his crimes displayed for a nation that had once applauded his power. He was sentenced to life, his influence gutted, his arrogance turned to dust. But victories had their costs. Father Miguel's body was never found. Jack survived, but his health never recovered, leaving Michael with another weight of guilt he could never shake. And that message, that poisonous, unanswered riddle, followed him like a ghost. Sometimes at night he imagined Emily's voice whispering that Sophia was his only child, that he had made the right choice. Other nights he imagined another daughter out there, waiting, abandoned by his decision. Both visions tore at him. 5 years later, under the pale marble arches of Arlington, Michael stood beside Sophia at Emily's grave. The stone read simply, "Emily Carter, mother, fighter, truth teller." Sophia, now 13, taller, sharper, with Emily's same stubborn jaw, placed fresh roses against the marker. "Do you think she'd be proud of us?" she asked. Her voice no longer trembled like a child's, but carried the steadiness of someone forged in fire. Michael swallowed hard, looking at the girl who had changed his life. "She'd be proud of you," he said softly. "More than I can ever explain." Sophia smiled faintly, brushing the hair from her eyes. "She'd be proud of you too. You didn't run." He wanted to believe her. Perhaps that was enough, that Emily's legacy lived in Sophia, not in his guilt. He wrapped his arm around his daughter as they walked away, leaving behind flowers, memories, and a question that might never be answered. Yet in the warmth of Sophia's hand in his, he felt something stronger than fear, the belief that even broken families could still become whole again. What did you feel about the journey of Michael, Emily, and Sophia and the choices they made? Comment 100 if you enjoyed this story. From which country are you watching this? Share this video with your friends, and thank you for being part of Hope Stories.